Hello everybody and welcome back. If you haven't already been here before, my name is Sharon and I'm going to be talking you through a beautiful floral design this afternoon in a step-by-step manner so that you can learn the hints and tips to make a beautiful floral design. If you've been before, welcome back. It's lovely to see you. Grab yourself a cheeky gin and tonic or a tea or coffee, sit back and relax. And let's get straight into today's design. Now this week I'm looking at an interpretive design inspired by a topiary tree. If you haven't heard of a topiary tree or you've maybe never seen one before, then you might be wondering what on earth it is. Now topiary is a style of gardening where the living shrub or tree is trained into a decorative or artificial shape. They've been popular in gardening since as far back as the Romans and were exceptionally popular during the Tudor period. Examples can be seen using box, cypress, yew and bay, and today we see them either side of the front door or lining the pathway to the entrance, and we often see them dividing areas of the garden and sectioning off things or ugly areas that we don't want to see. Now shapes can be circular, square or pyramids, and they can even be clipped to form into shapes of animals or objects. Now today I've chosen to replicate a ball-shaped tree using fresh flowers instead of foliage. So sit back and let's get started. My flower choice to create this topiary tree are these amazing alliums. They're really big heads, and of course because it's that spherical form, that round shape, it's really going to lend itself well to the shape of my topiary tree on the top. The long stem is going to give me a clear negative space between the top section and the bottom, and it's almost replicating the stem of those true topiary trees that you would find in gardens. So that's my flower that's going to form the top, and then to link the colours from the top to the bottom I've got a selection of this really pretty Statice. This is the everlasting Statice that will dry really well, very popular flower grown in UK gardens. I've introduced a bit of zesty lime green with the Alchemilla Mollis. This one again is going to help give me a link between the green colouring of the stem. I've got some very small alliums, the closest that I could get in the colour combination to match the allium. So again, I'm repeating that round shape from the allium on the top to the round shape of the design on the bottom. And then I've chosen myself some grey Eucalyptus. I've got two different types. This one is Eucalyptus populus and this one is Eucalyptus robusta. Similar colour, but it gives me a really good link between the silvery greys of my container and really complements the lilac purple tones of my flowers. So that's my basic flower selection. Now my mechanics this week and my container, you might have seen me use this style of container but in a larger size. This is the smaller version, and I felt that when I visualised the size that these alliums are going to form on the top of the design, this one suited the overall scale. So again, we're talking about scale and proportion of floral design. I didn't want to go too small because then the design would be top heavy and these big spherical forms on the top would really be too large for the container on the bottom. And obviously if I went with the bigger container at the bottom, the base section of the design would be much larger than the top, and then it would really look out of proportion with one another. Right, okay, I'm just going to slightly pull this back so you can see a clear view of it. And you'll see that I've got two whole pieces of the floral foam, and if I try to place the two alongside one another in the container, they don't quite fit. They're a little bit too large. But I need the size of that foam at the top. When you think about the stem thickness, by the time I've added 4 or 5 stems into the foam, we're going to take up quite a large space. So I do need the width of 2 blocks of foam. So what I'm going to do is just chamfer away some of the foam off the bottom so that it fits into my container more suitably. So all we're going to do is just take a little bit off the edges so that we're narrowing the bottom so it fits more suitably into my container. Now it might take a couple of goes before we get it right, but it means that they'll fit really snugly in there. There we are, that's not bad. First attempt even worked quite well. Let's get rid of my extra pieces and just wipe down so that I'm not working in all this mess. So if we tip it forward, you can see now I have a real large area, big surface area there to put my flowers into. If you were forming the top section of your topiary tree with thinner flowers, maybe an Alchemilla or a sunflower, then you might get away with using one block of foam. But for today, I really need a wide section for those big allium stems. Right, now what I'm also going to do here with my tape, so this is the standard or the thinner gauge of the Oasis tape or floral tape, pot tape, it has lots of different names. And what I'm going to do initially is take it around the 2 blocks, and that will help hold them together. This is a real good technique if you're transporting your design long distance as well. It stops your foam moving around. And what I'm also going to do, I've got myself a few odd pieces of floral foam. So these are offcuts, and I often keep offcuts to one side because that now can be used to wedge down the side of my container. So I'm not wasting any new bits of foam, but it also gives that extra stability there in my container so my foam isn't moving around. I could tape over the top. I think that's going to be fine as it is, but that tape round there will stop those 2 pieces of foam splaying out. It'll keep them nicely compact together. And of course, remember that this is going to be the front section in between the 2 handles, so I've lined my floral foam up so it fits in that gap. Sometimes when you're learning, you end up with your foam not quite central in your container. Right, I think my mechanics are all prepared nicely. Now we can start arranging with our gorgeous flowers. Now in an ideal world, we're going to go at least twice the height of our container. These alliums are absolutely gorgeous. Now I've just moved the camera angle back a little bit so that you can see the height of the arrangement and not so much the base of my container, because it is quite important to get the full height of the arrangement in. Now we're going to go at least twice the height of my container, and that hopefully is just in camera shot. And my stems are very rounded, they're quite slippery, so what I'm going to do to give me an extra piece of support in the foam is I'm just going to cut that slightly at an angle. Stops it spinning, it stops it rotating around in the foam. And what I'm going to do is almost form a spherical dome shape at the top here, almost like a round ball. So I'm going to work my way around and almost an imaginary centre point. If you had flowers that were quite weak stemmed, you could insert almost a garden cane in the middle there, and you would get some extra support from that straight rigid stem in the middle. But hopefully my alliums are strong enough to support themselves. Now remember that little trick, turn your stem upside down, allow yourself some extra stem length to insert into the foam, and what I've almost got to try and do is angle them so we're going to get that very dramatic ball effect there on the top. And we'll keep going. Now my stems of some of these alliums are a bit wibbly wobbly, they're not particularly straight. But what I will do at the end is I'm almost going to tie them together and put a decorative piece of ribbon around to pull them all in tightly together, and hopefully we'll get a better shape on the top. So for a moment what I'm doing is I'm looking at the angle of that flower and I'm angling this one slightly outwards so we exaggerate that ball shape on the top. Now at the moment it might be quite flat here at the top section, so what I'm going to do here is add a flower in a little bit taller so that I create more of a ball shape there on the top. Now probably if I was working on this for a customer, this is just obviously for a YouTube video now, I would probably lower the position that I'm working at it from so I can appreciate this head a little bit better. Now I'm hoping we've got quite a good shape going on there. It's quite circular at the top. Just adjust as you go along if you feel it's not sitting in the position that you want it to be. What I think I'm going to do here at this stage is add another one to give me a bit more of the circular effect at the top. It's almost a bit flat there on the top. So we're going to work around. And again, you know, I often say this in a video, if you're at home you can spend a bit more time than I can. And again, I often say this as well, you're looking at it from a slightly different position than I am, so you might see a slightly different shape for me, but you get, hopefully you get the style and the impression of what I'm trying to create. Now what I'm going to do is almost put two shorter ones at the base so that that ball shape becomes a bit more clearer. So a little bit, not too short with that one. I'm trying to now form the circular shape at the bottom. This one I think is going to work better. Now this design I always think looks amazing on a buffet table. Don't know if I would use the Alliums because they obviously have quite a strong onion scent to them because they're part of the onion family. But look wonderful with sunflowers. You could get a really good effect with the sunflowers. So again, just play around with them until you get the shape that you're trying to achieve. And now you can hopefully see why I needed to have such a big piece of floral foam there at the bottom. There we are. So how are we doing so far? A little bit, get that one a bit further underneath, and then when I tie the stems together we're going to have that really effective ball shape there at the top with all the stems. Right, okay, so we're nearly there. I think for a moment that's the best shape I'm going to get. If I had a bit more time I could spend straightening the stems out and working a bit harder on that top section, but I think for a moment that gives me a really good sphere, good spherical shape. And if you've had the advantage of visiting any Tudor style gardens where they have knot gardens, then you will see lots of these topiary trees in position. Of course they're very popular at the moment outside your front door with maybe a bay or a box tree where they've been shaped like this one into that lovely ball shape, or you might even have the pyramid styles outside your front door, but it's really very quite popular. And we get them in artificial flowers as well. And for now I think that's worked quite well. And I'm going to start with the varying types of eucalyptus. This one is the bigger of the leaf. I'm going to start with this one first and I'm going to work my way around the outside. This will give you your outline shape, and I'm probably about 1 inch wider than the container itself. That's, I think, proportionally a good size. So I'm almost creating a sort of collar around the outside, and I'm sitting the foliage close to my container. It's hard if you start at the top to then try and cover your foam underneath. I always encourage people to start at the base and work upwards because you can clearly see the parts of the foam that you haven't covered. Now this has a wonderful scent. I'm sure you're all aware of how lovely the eucalyptus is. Just going to spread a few pieces out because I haven't got as many pieces as I thought of the stronger foliage. And again, to bring the texture and the colour through of the stronger, bigger piece of eucalyptus, I'm going to bring a few sections up to the top as well. And then we'll use the smaller eucalyptus to go around the base. And I've chosen this because it's going to give me a contrast in the shape. Doesn't give me a great deal of contrast in texture and colour because of course the eucalyptus is very similar, but it will give me a variety in shapes. You could introduce a darker green foliage if you wanted to, or something with a lilac tone to it to blend with my alliums. But for now, the eucalyptus worked really well. Brilliant colour link. Whoop, I just threw that one on the floor. Beautiful colour link with my container. So I'm arranging this section in a radial form. So the points of the flower ends are all inserted into the foam at the same angle, so they're heading for the middle section of the foam. Whereas the alliums on the top are almost parallel, they're almost alongside one another, like I often refer to as soldiers standing in a line. So these pieces on the top have their own section of floral foam, whereas the bottom section is angled all in towards the centre in that quite traditional radial style of arranging. Okay, so a few more pieces at the base. And the height of my bottom section is the same as the widths. So I've created that circular dome shape and that dome effect at the bottom as well. Now if you had a square container, you would possibly make your bottom section squarer, but I'm repeating again the shape of my container and making a round design there at the base. Right, okay, now then I'm going to add in my softer material last. I'm going to go with these really pretty little alliums next. These are quite short stemmed, these have been grown locally as well, so lovely added bonus of having some locally grown material. And I've got 3, so I'm looking to evenly distribute the 3 so the space in between is the same all the way around. And the base section, because this is the larger flower, this is almost my focal flower, and what I've tried to achieve is that even distribution there of the flowers. You could quite easily make this front facing and place your flowers towards the front and sit it so that there's a wall behind it, but for my design I'm aiming to make it all round. I'm thinking about it sitting in the middle of a buffet table where guests will be walking and viewing it from all around. Now then, the lovely Statice. One of my favourites. I love the Statice. Reminds me of training to be a florist and working in the floristry industry. It's one that we can grow quite easily in a UK garden. Comes in a whole host of colours. And of course, with the trend for dried flowers at the moment, this is a really great one to grow if you've got your own garden, because it will dry quite easily. You don't need any specific equipment to do it, just hang it upside down somewhere where it's got lots of air circulating around it and the air isn't too damp. And I'm just using small pieces, and we've created the outline with the foliage. You've heard me say it lots of times. The outline shape has been formed and we don't need to go any larger or longer than the pieces of foliage that we've already created in there. So how's that looking so far? I think that's quite attractive. Now I've got this beautiful filler material. So this is the Alchemilla Mollis, zesty limey green. Going to give me a real contrast in colour, and it's going to help pick up on the green colouring of the stems. And I'm going to do exactly the same. Cut it so we've got quite short pieces, nothing longer than the foliage outline that we've already created. And I'm going to keep working around to give us an even distribution of the Alchemilla Mollis. Now you can of course use some of the alliums at the base here as well to bring the same colour and texture through, but I'm going to leave the base as it is here. I'm just going to fill in with some leatherleaf, slightly different colour, a bit of contrast between the greys, because I want the bottom to be quite natural and quite simple. I don't want to over clutter this bottom section and make it look really heavy. So we're just going to use the Florist leatherleaf that you've seen me use several times before, and I've chosen this one really because I feel at this stage it needs a bit of darker green. The grey, although it works really well with the container, I think it needs to have something to give a bit of depth to it, and the darker green foliage will help me achieve that. And you know, you can always plan to do an arrangement and you think in your head when you design it. I quite often sketch what I'm going to do beforehand and think about how the flowers are going to work together. And sometimes, even when I get to the end, often I think, oh, it needs something else. What else can I add in? The colour combination quite isn't as strong as I want it to be, or maybe the contrasts in the arrangement don't work quite as well as I anticipated them to be. So, you know, don't worry if you're learning and you get to the end of the arrangement and it's not quite how you were anticipating it to be. That's fine. It's no different to cooking when you've made a beautiful meal and then you go and taste it and it needs some salt, or the seasoning needs to be improved in some way. You know, don't be too hard on yourself. It's all about learning and experimenting. And there, so that, for me, the dark green gives some depth to the arrangement. It makes your eye travel more down into the centre. It's also given me a bit of a contrast in texture, contrast in colour and contrast in shape, which is of course one of those important parts of the principles and elements of design. And I think that works quite well. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use some lilac ribbon just to bring the stem ends a bit closer together. I'm not going to tie them too tight, and there'll be a photograph at the end of the design when it's completed, and I might just spend a couple of minutes turning the heads and twisting them round into a better position. But I've got two types of lilac ribbon. So this one was my original choice. It's pale lilac with a small polka dot on it, but I felt the scale of this wasn't right. It's too thin and too narrow for those great big heads of allium at the top. So I've changed it for a lace ribbon. Same colour combination, it's that gorgeous lilac, but because it's thicker, it's far more in keeping with the size of my allium heads and the size of my container on the bottom. So that's again scale and proportion, and it's really important that you consider your scale and proportion of your flowers and the environment you're in right through to your final accessories, your container, and anything that you might add in there. Where's my scissors? At the end. Right, so let's just put some little tails on the end of this. Now I've tied this just into a simple knot. You could of course do a more elaborate bow if you wanted to. The colour combination is really complementary, and hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into how to make a flower arrangement that's been inspired rather by a topiary tree. Now don't forget, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, then please do so. It helps other people find the videos, and of course hit the bell for a notification if you want to be informed when I upload a new video. I hope you've enjoyed that one. We'll be back again soon. Have a great week and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.